Okay, welcome, good evening. My name is Zach Benjamin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. Thank you for being here. Tonight's a solemn and important commemoration of one of humanity's darkest hours. This evening's activities come at a particularly sensitive time in our recent history. On Saturday, for the second time in 6 months, the peace of the Jewish Sabbath, Shabbat, in America was shattered by gunshots fired in hate at worshipers at a Jewish synagogue, this time in Poway, California, as we celebrated what should be one of the most joyful dates on the Hebrew calendar, the conclusion of Passover. The year is 2019, and Jewish blood is still being spilled in hate. This just days after one of the world's most respected news publications published a cartoon resurrecting one of the ugliest and oldest anti-Semitic tropes, portraying Jews as dogs exerting disproportionate influence over U.S. leadership. All of this is occurring in a discursive environment that sees elected officials from across the political spectrum expressing suspicion, encouraging mistrust against Jews and other vulnerable communities. And all of this is occurring as our ears still ring from the report of shots fired and lives upended and ended in mosques, churches, and other spaces that should be saved but can no longer be assumed so. Indeed, now more than ever, the phrase "never again" must carry the utmost gravity. We gather today to remember and commemorate the lives of the 6 million Jewish victims murdered by Nazi Germany and the 5 million other innocents lost to death camps and gas chambers of the Holocaust. Today also marks the launch of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico's United Against Anti-Semitism initiative, which will provide education to the community on what anti-Semitism is, the insidious ways in which it manifests itself, and how to combat and reject it. Indeed, anti-Semitism is a vicious, deadly prejudice that should be roundly condemned and fought at every possible opportunity with the utmost zeal and fervor. We must ensure that the same visceral reaction that society has to other publicly expressed forms of bias is also our instinctive reaction to anti-Semitism, bias against Jews, one of the oldest and deadliest forms of prejudice that exists. Our children must learn the hard lessons of the Holocaust through mandatory Holocaust education in our middle schools, high schools, and universities. Young people must absorb the stories of survivors, our last living links to this darkest area of human history. And once those survivors remain, they must watch, read, hear, and understand the testimonials of those who experienced the very worst that humanity has to offer, so that they may not repeat the errors of the past. Never again must mean never again. I'm now pleased to introduce the President of the Board of Directors of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico, Dr. Ron Duncan-Hart.
As New Mexico remembers the commemoration of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day when the unthinkable happened, in little more than 30 months, half the Jewish population of the world was killed. In 2019, 77 years after it started, we are still fewer Jews in the world than there were in the spring of 1942. Anti-Semitism in the West has not been a constant given. It has ebbed and flowed over the last 1,000 years. As we are confronting a new emergence of anti-Semitism today, what does it look like this time? And what does it mean to us today? Jews are being blamed in anti-Semitic tropes that range from being against Israel to blaming Jews for being the hidden state that controls politics and commerce, and even the old accusation of blood libel has been resurrected. Anti-Semitism is not a seamless phenomenon, but a spectrum of expressions of stereotyping Jews that range from Judeophobia, anti-Judaism, anti-Jewishness, anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism, and the anti-Semitism that we know. The fact that so many words are required to define the various nuances of anti-Semitism gives an indication of the complex and extensive nature of what it is. As we confront this new resurgence of anti-Semitism and the linked violence against minorities, not only Jews, but Muslims, African Americans, and other groups, the Jewish Federation in New Mexico has issued a call to stand united against anti-Semitism, not only anti-Semitism, but against these expressions of intolerance and hate that are in our society today. And I would like to echo, as Zach mentioned, and all of us have fresh in our minds, that never again. I would like to recognize Teresa Casados, the Chief Operating Officer of the Office of the Governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, and we appreciate your being here.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me and giving me a few minutes to speak. It is absolutely an honor for me to represent Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham and her administration at this very important commemoration. And she asked me to express her deepest apologies to all of you for her not being able to be here this evening. I know the Governor has all of you and the significance of this important event and this day on her mind. This Holocaust Remembrance Day is especially important. Our Jewish neighbors in New Mexico, across the country, and indeed across the globe, have been menaced, threatened, and even killed in recent weeks, all for nothing more than their faith. It's a chilling reminder of how far we must go as a community and as a society. We live in an increasingly unstable world. Unfortunately, threats against those of a certain faith are more and more commonplace, and violence against faith groups, be they Jewish or Muslim or any other, is unacceptably on the rise. As you know all too well in New Mexico, only a few weeks ago, a restaurant owner in Albuquerque expressed hateful anti-Semitic comments on social media. I know the Governor was grateful the extended New Mexico community rose up in support of our Jewish neighbors in the wake of those comments. But this kind of rhetoric is a symptom, not the cause. The cause is divisiveness for divisiveness' sake. Hatred and bigotry amplified. Hatred allowed to fester and to spread. The solution in the face of hateful comments or the horrific violence at the synagogue in San Diego last week is love. Love for our neighbors, no matter who they are, no matter what they believe or how they look. The solution is a recommitment to faith, all of the beautiful and clarifying spirit of faith. The solution is to come together as we all have here today and remind ourselves we are stronger for our togetherness. Remind ourselves of the horrors of the past, the present, but also the relentless goodness of strength in numbers, of love, and of faith. In the aftermath of the shooting at this synagogue, Rabbi Goldstein, who lost a finger in the attack, wrote in the New York Times that he hoped his lost finger would help strengthen him, help steer his commitment to living more proudly in his faith. He wrote it would be for him a reminder that every single human being is created in the image of God, a reminder that I am a part of the people that has survived the worst destruction and will always endure. A reminder that my ancestors gave their lives so that I can live in freedom in America. And a reminder, most of all, to never, ever, ever be afraid to be Jewish. His humility and grace in the face of a terrorist shedding innocent blood in his own house of worship is an awe-inspiring example of what we should strive for today on this day of remembrance. We must be resilient. We must not allow anger or fear to overcome our commitment to love, hope, and faith. It was true then, it is true now. Thank you for your leadership, for your commitment to community, And again, thank you for having me here tonight to share in this occasion for you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Representative Brian Egolf, Speaker of the State Legislature of the State of New Mexico.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Jewish Federation of New Mexico, not just for the invitation to me to be here, but for choosing to have this event in your state capital. I think it is entirely appropriate and very fitting that we come to the center of state government to remember the horrors of the Holocaust and to bring the state's attention to this important...
Could you speak louder, please?
How's that? I want to appreciate that this event is being held in this room, that on this day when people of conscience and faith are called upon to remember an atrocity of unimaginable and unparalleled size and scope and terror, that the remembrance take place in your state capital, in a building at the center of state government, to focus the attention of the people and of the government on never forgetting what happened. We never forget because we want to make sure that people of every generation are taught what happened and what happens when people of good conscience and people of faith fail to speak up and speak out and stand up and stand against hatred and bigotry. We have seen, and I'm encouraged, and I'm proud, I should say, to represent Santa Fe. Growing up here, I was baptized in the Church of the Holy Faith on Palace Avenue. A church that, growing up in that congregation, we were reminded that that building was made possible by generous charitable donations in the late 1800s from Santa Fe's Jewish community, which is a founder of so many of the cultural and so many of the wonderful things that we have in this community. Our Catholic Basilica is the only Catholic church in the world to have Hebrew above its doors as you walk in, because it was the generosity of the Jewish community that made that building possible. Santa Fe is an example of shared commitment to values that cross religions, values of community and finding strength in diversity. It's not just rhetoric here in Santa Fe. It's not just rhetoric in New Mexico. It's the reality. We are an example of how people of diverse faiths and backgrounds can come together and do great things, working side by side and hand in hand. We saw that in this last legislative session after the mosque attack in New Zealand. We have now our first Muslim, our first Asian member in the House of Representatives. And he gave an incredibly moving statement from the floor. And the first person to stand up to speak in support of him was a Jewish member from Albuquerque, Damon Eli, who happens to be Abbas Akil's best friend in the legislature. And they both immediately asked to be excused from the proceedings that day so that they could attend together, a Muslim and a Jew, the ceremony at a mosque here in Santa Fe in support of that community. And Abbas returned the sentiment when he lent support to Damon just a few days ago after the synagogue shooting. We try to lead and live by example to show that the divisive rhetoric, the hateful speech, the attacks that break our hearts, that make us question humanity, that make us wonder who could do such a thing, and is hatred spreading. We, in your legislature and in government, we follow the examples of Damon Eli and Abbas Akil to show that an embrace, take the hand of another, whether it's to offer comfort, whether it's to work together toward a common goal, that we really do achieve wonderful things and create a great example when we come together and embrace our diversity. We should all be proud to be part of this community in New Mexico because we are a wonderful example that hopefully others will see that when you stand up against hate, when you stand against hatred and violence, that there is much more strength in that in the cowards that attack a synagogue and speak out with anti-Semitic statements. So thank you very much for the honor of being with you this evening, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now please introduce State Representative David Gallegos of the City of Hobbs.
Good evening. I also want to thank you for coming to your capital. I've been working with the Jewish community now for 2 years on different projects, but it seems to me like every year I get closer and closer to the community. I learn more and more. Starting out with the 50th reunification of Jerusalem, when we had that here, to me that was a pinnacle at that point in time for me. But today, it's a really humble time to be here with you in remembrance, New Mexico remembers. To see and to understand what you've gone through, what your race and religion and your people have gone through, your family members had to endure, brings me to a reality. I took my granddaughter in 2016 to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and it was life-changing. For us to understand the trauma your people had to go through, and that you see now the speaker was stating the anti-Semitic actions that are still happening now that have to stop. But to see that, to try to understand it, and see what's going on, what history had, and as Zach had brought up earlier, that we never forget. And I truly believe what you're doing here tonight is helping us prepare the next generation. We don't ever want to see the atrocity happen again. And it's going to take all of us having a message out there amongst our communities. I live in the very southeast side of the state, but they need to understand what the Holocaust did, what it did to you, and what it continues to do to you, your people, and your religion. I appreciate the honor to be here today to be a part of this, but I read a book, and it was Holocaust Survivor by Mike Jacobs, and I just wanted to, in the description that I have in the book, he stated that actually it was to an employee of mine that actually got it in Dallas, Texas, when he was still alive. In the book, he wrote to her to always be positive, to always be hopeful, and to always believe. But at the very end, he wrote, and to me it spoke volumes, remember that this would never happen again. And to me that speaks to what we're doing tonight. I think truly as a community, as a state, as your legislators, we all need to work together to make sure that we prepare the next generation to do what's right by not just the Jewish community, but all communities. And I want to thank you for everything you do to bring enlightenment to me, being allowed to participate in some functions with the Jewish community. It has brought me and my family closer to an understanding. We'll never get there after reading The Survivor. I hope never to see that again. But I understand now more of the tragedy that your family had to endure. And I look forward to our speaker today, because it's one of those where I think Mr. Holten is going to be the first survivor that I've ever met. We took pictures earlier, but to me to understand that this community not only survived, but you thrived. We've got doctors, we've got leaders, we've got business owners here, that I do not think any other nationality, religion, or people could endure what you had to endure. There again, I thank you for the honor to be here tonight. I ask that you just enjoy your capital, and we look forward to our speaker. God bless you.
Thank you, Representative Gallegos. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Alan Weber, Mayor of the city of Santa Fe.
Well, thank you. It's so heartwarming to be here with so many friends and the family of Santa Fe and beyond Santa Fe who are here to remember. Every generation is called upon to remember. Every generation is called upon to pay our respects to those who died and to those who kept others from dying in the Holocaust. And Santa Fe seems a far, far distant place from the death camps of Germany and Austria and Poland. I've been to Dachau. I've seen what they look like. I've walked through the gates. I've been touched by the displays. And I've also been down to the border, and I've seen what our government is doing today to innocent people and to children. And what it reminds me is that anti-Semitism and intolerance and bigotry and hatred of the other is a virus that runs through the human family. It's not unique to any one place or any one country or any one period of time in history. And so when we're here today, we are called upon to remember the past, but to be present now, and to be spokespeople for our values, for what makes us the people of the earth who stand up for everyone who faces bigotry, anti-Semitism, hatred, separation for being other. Santa Fe is, as the speaker said, a remarkable place. We are capable of putting the Entrada to rest, and we're also capable of waking up and finding anti-Semitic graffiti in our parks. And these things ought never to be separated. They are two sides of the same human coin. We carry it with us as long as we don't stand vigilantly against it. The lesson that we had here a few weeks ago when there was a presentation from the consul from the Netherlands of Anne Frank's diary was a remarkable evening. A performance by our young people in music and in stagecraft of that book and that amazing young woman. The other book that, for me, bookends the Holocaust is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And the lesson of that book that I carry with me is that in all times, the one thing that can never be taken away from any of us, the thing that Viktor Frankl carried with him in all the concentration camps he was in and all that he survived, the surviving human value is choice. They can do anything to you, he wrote, but they cannot take away choice. And we are free every single day to exercise choice in what we do to live our values, to reach out to others who are endangered by hatred and bigotry and anti-Semitism of all kinds. We are free to express our choice in how we use our time here and now, not only to remember the past, but to make sure that it never happens again here in our country, on our soil, in our state, and in our country. These are perilous times. These are perilous times, and those of us who have had family, had friends, generations before us, suffer the consequences of the Holocaust, we have to live our choice here and now to speak up, to stand united, and to take action against hatred in all of its form. That's how we remember the Holocaust. Thank you.
It's now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. He has educated thousands of students throughout New Mexico and the country and others. It's a pleasure and an honor to have with us tonight Holocaust survivor Andy Holten.
Thank you all for coming out. I will go over the history that I present to the children or students that I talk to give them an understanding of what happened to me and what happened to my community. So I'll start out. I was born in Holland, the Netherlands, a couple of years before the Second World War started. I was part of a Jewish family. We moved initially away from where we were living in a small town outside Amsterdam. We were moved, I understand, because my parents were nervous about the neighbors being German sympathizers. They didn't want to be near there. So we moved to Amsterdam. We moved in with my grandparents. Turns out we were living right next door to Meat Peace, the lady who worked for the Anne Frank family. Meat Peace is the one also who found the diary after the family was arrested. She also went around town to buy her food while the family was up in the attic in hiding, so that the family had something to eat. And she later then gave the diary to Anne's father when he was the only one who came back from the camps. Holland, to go back up a second, Germany invaded Holland in 1940. They took over the country. They set up all the rules and laws that they had also set up in Germany as soon as Hitler took over in 1933. So the general objective of the German government was to separate the Jews from the non-Jews. They made life very, very difficult for the Jewish people. Jewish teachers, Jewish attorneys, doctors could no longer do their job because they could no longer interact with the non-Jewish people. So the Jewish kids had to find teachers, Jewish teachers in a special school because they could no longer go to the public schools. Holland had on the order of 130,000 Jews living there at the beginning of the war. Quite a few had come from other countries like Germany or Austria, people that had hoped to avoid a war. Holland had remained neutral during the First World War. People were hopeful that would happen again. But that was not to happen. Holland was invaded, and they were ruled by the Germans for the next 5 years. Life became very difficult. They started arresting people, Jewish people, as well as men that they could use in their factories. So quite a few people in Holland were trying to figure out a way how to avoid being arrested. Leaving the country was very difficult. Holland has water on two sides, Germany on the other side, and Belgium and France at the south side. No real good places to go, okay? So people try to figure out, how do I avoid arrest? The best option that they had was going to hiding. The Anne Frank family, they built their own hiding place up in the attic. that was a good place while it lasted. And Meat Peace was the one who provided food for them, so they were in good shape. But a lot of people did not have that option. My parents realized at some point that it was just a matter of time that they would be arrested as well. They talked to good friends of theirs, and they said, "Can we move in with you?" These people said, "Yes, no problem." Then when my parents asked and said, "Hey, we really need to go into hiding now," these people said, "No, sorry, our wife is expecting, we don't trust the neighbors, we cannot take you in." So my parents were then stuck. They didn't know what to do. They then contacted the underground, the resistance movement. They said, "Is there any chance you can find at least a hiding place for our 5-year-old boy?" Which was must have been a very difficult decision. We read about separations of families these days, and I can picture what my parents went through. Anyway, the resistance movement came up with a family, a Christian family in the town of Harlem, that was willing to take me. So the last 2 years of the war, I lived with that family. I had been given a false name, so I was really invisible. If they asked, "Who was this kid?" they gave that false name. They said, "Well, is there any paperwork?" No paperwork, no birth certificate, no nothing. But that's what saved my life. So I was, for 2 years, what the Dutch called, I was ondergedoken. I was underwater, meaning I was invisible. And those people took wonderful care of me. They kept me safe. From time to time, I had to get out of the house when there was reason to believe that the police would show up or the soldiers would show up. But I was kept safe for those 2 years. I was not able to go to a public school when I reached the age of 7. The public school realized what the situation was. They didn't want to have a Jewish kid running around without paperwork, without a birth certificate. So a Bible school where the kids of the family had gone, they were willing to take me. And I was able to go to a Bible school for about 2 or 3 years, towards the end of the war and after the war was over. At the end of the war, there was a process to register surviving Jews, and the people that I was living with did their best to register me. They didn't know my name, but they said they gave a wrong name. There was some confusion. They didn't know my birthday because I didn't know. I was too young to tell them. But they registered me the best they could in the hope that someone would come back and claim me, my parents or whatever. But no one came back. No one came to claim me. So I stayed with that family. They became my guardians. I call them my foster parents. My parents, after I had been separated from them, they were in hiding. Don't know exactly where, but they were in hiding somewhere, but were arrested. And they wound up in a camp in Holland, a Holten camp, from where the trains left every week for Poland. My parents, they had to register themselves, and somehow my name got on that registration form, and I have a copy of that form. So it showed my parents' name and my name, but they didn't have me. My parents then were put on a train for Auschwitz. It was in a cattle car. People had to stand up, tightly packed, for 2.5 days as they went from Holland to Auschwitz. And that I have that registration card, and it shows that they were on this train on this particular day. If I had been with my parents, I would have been on that train as well. But I was fortunate that I was in hiding. When that train arrived at Auschwitz, there was a selection. They looked at the people and they decided whether they had any use for them. If they were men in the age range of 20 to 40, they send them this way because they could use them in the factories. If they were too young or too old or whatever, and they had no use for them, they send them this way and send them straight to the gas chamber. My mother and my grandparents were sent straight to the gas chamber. On that train were 122 children. All 122 were sent straight to the gas chamber that same day. My father, he was selected to work. He worked at a camp near Auschwitz. It's called Monowitz. He worked there for a number of months. It was run by the IG Farben Company. They had a contract with the German army to supply different things, oil and tires and things like that. But they had to use the Jewish prisoners from Auschwitz. The terrible, terrible work. The people were not fed very well and overworked. And most of them wound up in a hospital after just a couple of months. My father wound up in a hospital at Monowitz, and I have a release form from where he was released from the hospital, but he was too sick to work any longer, and he was sent straight to the gas chamber as well. My other grandparents, they had been arrested even earlier, and they wound up in a camp called Sobibor, which was a very, very notorious camp, where about 35,000 Jews, Dutch Jews, were killed, and 19 survived. There was an uprising at that camp, and then they closed, and an escape, and then they closed the camp down. So I lived with the family after the war. I never met a blood relative for the first 55 years. Finally, through the use of the internet and all kinds of help from people with different documents and so on, I was able to find 2 great aunts and several distant cousins. I've met, the great aunts have since passed, but I have met them. Some of the cousins I have met as well. I finished high school while I was with the Meyer family. The Meyer family are the people that took me in during the war. They elected to keep me. When no one came back to claim me, they elected to keep me. They could have sent me to an orphanage or something, but they elected to keep me. They had grown quite fond of me. They were wonderful people. They were later recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous Gentiles. After I finished high school, 19 years old, I was able to immigrate to the United States. The United States had set up a special quota for war victims, and I was able to qualify under that. I applied in May of 56, when I was 1918, and was gone in December. Came to the United States, went to City College of New York, where I got a degree in physics. I played a lot of soccer as a relief for my whatever, and then after graduating from college, I became a United States citizen, and I went into the Air Force. I was an Air Force officer for about 5 years, worked for the Air Force for another 11 years, and then later on I came to Albuquerque to support Air Force work even more. So then I retired and became a substitute teacher. Somehow that's suited me. And I have been, it's hard to believe, but I've been a substitute teacher now for almost 20 years. I know. Some of the teachers may think that I'm not totally sane, but anyway, being a substitute teacher, I get an opportunity to talk to kids a lot. Teachers that know about my background invite me to come and talk to them when they reach that point in history or even before. Yesterday I was at Van Buren Middle School, talked to 3 groups of kids. All was very well received. And the Rio Rancho Public Schools recognized me for being a substitute and also for talking to the kids. And I really appreciated that, and they selected me to the Hall of Honor, which to me was a great. Thank you. So, last week we had a commemoration in Albuquerque at the Federation, or at the Congregation Albert, and I came up with the thought that what the Holocaust meant to me. And the Holocaust meant to me, I have trouble with that, my parents having to give me away in the hope that I would survive, that I would have a better chance of surviving. They must have seen what the future was going to bring to them, but they thought if I would be with a Christian family, I would have a better chance. They had that foresight, and I think that was sort of heroic. And the other part of the Holocaust for me is them being on that train, packed in a cattle car, standing up for 2.5 days as they went from Holland to Poland, to Auschwitz, where they were killed. So that is what the Holocaust means to me. And I thank you for your interest, and I appreciate the thought. Thank you.
Before we conclude tonight, first I'd like to just make a brief introduction, recognize Rabbi Levertov of the Chabad Jewish Center of Santa Fe. We're pleased to have you with us tonight. Now, to conclude our program tonight, I'm pleased to introduce a prayer service that's been organized by Santa Fe Jewish clergy, Rabbi Neil Amswych of Temple Beth Shalom, Cantor Cindy Friedman of HaMakom, Rabbi Martin Levy of Congregation Beit Tikva, and Rabbi Jack Shlachter of Los Alamos Jewish Center and HaMakom.
We begin with silence. The silence of death, the silence after destruction. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved blank of space around us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night, no messenger to tell the full tale. There is only silence. The silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we now link our silence.
Believe Almighty God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
Shema by Primo Levi. You who live secure in your warm houses, who return at evening to find hot food and friendly faces, consider whether this is a man who labors in the mud, who knows no peace, who fights for a crust of bread, who dies at a yes or a no. Consider whether this is a woman without hair or name, with no more strength to remember, eyes empty and womb cold as a frog in winter. Consider that this has been. I commend these words to you. Engrave them on your hearts when you are in your house, when you walk on your way, when you go to bed, and when you rise. Repeat them to your children, or may your house crumble, disease render you powerless, and your offspring avert their faces from you. Please rise.
The translation of the Ilmalei Rachamim for Yom HaShoah. Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you, in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. Amen.
Ilmalei Rachamim Shochen B'maromim Amatzei Menucha Nechona Amatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanachei Ashechina. 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 Amatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanachei nishmatam Adonai unachalatam v'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavam v'nomar
Please be seated.
Words from Abraham Sutzkever, written in 1941. Sutzkever survived the Vilna Ghetto. I lie in this coffin. I lie in this coffin the way I would lie in a suit made of wood. A bark tossed on treacherous waves, a cradle, an ark. From here, where all flesh is taken to eternity, I call to you, sister, and you, in your distance, still hear me. Something stirs in my coffin, a presence. You're here. I know you by the stars of your eyes, your light, your breath, and tears. This is the order of things, and the plot. Today here, tomorrow not, but now in my coffin, my suit made of wood. My speech lives, my speech sings.
Please rise.
Yitgadal
Auschwitz,
v'yitkadash
Lutsch,
Shemei Rabbah
Hana,
v'yalma divra chilutei
Babiya,
v'yamlich malchutei
Maitene,
v'chayechon v'yomechon
Birkenau,
v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael
Kovno,
ha'agala b'zman kaviv
Janovska,
v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah v'barach le'olam v'olmei olamai Yitbarach v'yishtabach
Theresienstadt,
v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam
Buchenwald,
v'yitnaseh v'yithadar
Treblinka,
v'yitalev v'yithalal
Vilna,
Shmei d'Kedusha v'yichu
Bergen-Belsen,
le'elam
Mauthausen,
Mimkol birchata v'shirata
Dachau,
tushbchata v'nechemata
Minsk,
da'amiram be'alma
Warsaw,
v'yimaru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav u'ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru Amen.
Please remain standing as we sing the words, Oseh Shalom b'mromav. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen.
Oh, say